I woke up to a foreclosure notice and found out my husband took a $300K loan against our house to open a bar with his mistress. He forged my signature, drained my account, and lied to the bank. When I confronted him, he sneered, "She believes in me, you just nag." Then he took the car and left a note. "You were just the starter wife." I was forced to move in with my aunt, broke and alone, until I found one fatal error in the loan docs, and I woke up to pounding on the door. It was 7:12 a.m., and I thought it was the mailman or maybe a delivery. But when I opened it, there were two men in polos holding a clipboard and an envelope with my name on it. "Mrs. Bennett?" one of them asked. "Yes, I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is a formal notice of foreclosure. You'll need to vacate the premises within 45 days unless restitution is made." My stomach dropped. I just stood there barefoot, half asleep, holding that thick envelope like it was a live grenade. "There's some mistake," I said. "Our mortgage is paid. We've never missed a payment." The guy looked uncomfortable. "It says here there's a defaulted loan against the property." "A loan? Against my house?" I tore open the envelope right there on the porch, hands shaking. Inside was a copy of a $300,000 home equity loan. My husband, Evan Bennett, had taken it out 5 months ago. His signature was on it. And mine, too, except I never signed anything. The date was 3 days after our anniversary trip to Charleston. I remember because he'd been on his phone constantly, saying he was handling some business stuff. By the time I finished reading, my heart was pounding so hard it felt like I was going to pass out. I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Then I called his work and the receptionist said, "Oh, Evan doesn't work here anymore. He resigned last month." That was when the dread hit. The kind that crawls up your neck and makes everything go silent. I tore through our office, drawers, files, everything. And then I found it. A folder labeled EB Consulting. Inside, bank statements, wire transfers, and a business registration for a place called the Blue Door Bar and Lounge. His name and another name listed as co-owners. Her name, Amber Collins, the woman I'd been suspicious of for months. The one he swore was just a friend from work. That afternoon, when I finally got him on the phone, he didn't even sound guilty, just tired. "Evan, what did you do?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from breaking. He sighed. "I started something new, okay? Something real. Amber believes in me. You just nag. You never believed in me." I was silent. Then he said, so casually it made me sick, "You were just the starter wife." That night he came home, packed a bag, took the car, and left me a note on the counter that said, "Don't call. You'll be fine." I sat there until morning, staring at the stack of forged papers, wondering how I could even begin to fix what he'd done. It wasn't until weeks later, after I'd moved in with my aunt, after my savings were gone, after I'd stopped crying every night, that I found the one thing that changed everything. One crucial error in those loan documents. And when I realized what it was, I knew exactly how to destroy him. Evan and I met in Raleigh, North Carolina, when we were both 24. I worked as a nurse at WakeMed, and he was in IT. He was quiet, polite, the kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and opened your car door. I fell for him fast because he made me feel safe. After growing up with a dad who gambled away everything we owned, safe felt like love. We bought our first house together 5 years later, a 2-story colonial with white shutters and a backyard full of oak trees. We didn't have much, but it was ours. We painted every room ourselves. He joked that it was the house our kids will grow up in. That was the dream: stability, family, partnership. For a long time, he really did seem like my person. He'd bring me lunch during long shifts. We'd spend Sundays fixing up the yard. He wasn't flashy, but he was steady. Until he wasn't. It started about 2 years before the foreclosure little things I ignored. He'd come home later and later, saying he had networking events. He'd get defensive if I asked where he was. He said he was trying to start a business, but he never told me what kind. Then Amber showed up. She was younger, worked at his company, and posted a lot. I only knew her from social media, flashy clothes, big smile, all those motivational quotes about believing in your man's dreams. One night, Evan left his laptop open, and I saw her name in his messages. He'd sent her a photo of the house, captioned, "One day soon we'll have something even better." When I confronted him, he flipped it, said I was insecure, controlling, always assuming the worst. He made me feel crazy for even asking. I believed him because I wanted to. Then things got stranger. He started pulling money from our joint account for business expenses. He promised to pay it back. I didn't push. I thought he was finally chasing the startup he'd always talked about. I was proud, honestly. But the truth was, he'd been planning this for months, maybe years. While I was working double shifts to pay off the last of our student loans, he was meeting lawyers, falsifying my signature, and transferring our savings to a woman he'd known less than a year. After he left, I checked every account. Our joint savings, empty. My emergency fund, gone. He'd transferred it all to an account under her name, same bank, same branch. I called, but the bank said because my name wasn't on the withdrawal authorization, there was nothing they could do. So there I was, broke, homeless, humiliated, and legally responsible for a $300,000 loan I never signed. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. My aunt let me stay in her guest room. Every night, I'd scroll through photos of the Blue Door Bar and Lounge, watching him and Amber smiling in front of my house's debt. He even had the nerve to use our wedding song in a promo video for their grand opening. But I didn't go crazy. Not yet. I spent my nights reading through every page of those loan documents, every number, every clause, every signature line. And one night I saw it, a tiny thing, something no one else had noticed. Something that made the entire loan legally worthless if proven. And I realized I could use his own greed to ruin him completely. For the first few days after I found the error, I did the dumb, angry things people do when everything collapses. I smashed a jar of ceramic flowers in the guest room. I called every one of his friends and asked them to tell me to his face what a coward he was. I burned the box of his old t-shirts until the smoke alarm made me stop. It didn't help. It only made me feel like a caricature of myself, a woman with nothing left but fury. So I stopped performing and started digging. I turned my aunt's little kitchen table into command central. I taped photocopies of the loan papers to the wall and circled the same line over and over until my eyes hurt. The error. A misspelling. Not some poetic metaphor, a literal misspelling in the notary block. The notary's printed name didn't match the notary seal. The seal said Marissa Cole, typed line said Marissa Cole. Small, stupid, clerical, but enough. Banks hate mistakes like that because they're proof that the document wasn't properly executed. I also found another mismatch. The loan application listed our house address, but the county parcel ID was for a different plot, one street over, a house that sold 2 years ago. Whoever filed this had been sloppy. Either Evan was rushed or someone else was trying to hide something. Either way, it gave me leverage. Leverage felt like oxygen. I started with the bank. I went down there in person and told the customer service rep I wanted to speak to the fraud department. She looked at my face, tired, red-eyed, practiced calm, and led me to a tiny conference room. I placed the photocopies on the table and pointed to the misspelled notary and the wrong parcel ID. "This loan is a fraud," I said. "Someone forged my signature and the paperwork is wrong." They were polite, because that's how these banks are, polite and immovable. "Ma'am, unless you can prove identity theft or forgery, the loan stands. The signatures match our records." They brought out a copy of the signed loan packet with my signature and a printed statement saying both borrowers confirmed the application. It was like watching a stage play where I was the only actor improvising. So I hired a paralegal off Craigslist for cash I didn't have and taught myself how to file a notarized affidavit of forgery. Every step felt illegal and righteous and tiny at once. I filed the affidavit with the county recorder and sent certified letters to the bank, to the notary's commission board, and to the title company. I wanted their records to carry my name in black and white. This is forgery. Meanwhile, I started going to the Blue Doors page. Amber's face was everywhere, smiles, cocktails, that same lazy "I believed in him" caption. I printed every post, every tag. I found a Yelp review from someone who went to the soft opening and described the bartender as so attentive, brought the owner out such vision. The owner in the photo was Evan, wearing the same watch he'd stolen from my drawer. It was grotesque. People started noticing. My aunt's friend referred me to a woman at the county clerk's office who hated fraud cases and loved to dig. A local real estate lawyer agreed to meet me for a discounted consultation because no one should be foreclosed on by their cheater husband. Little things like that made me feel less alone. They also made me angrier. I wanted to hurt him in the way I hurt, the slow, surgical kind. That week, I waited outside the blue door at closing. I watched couples leave with neon receipts, watched Evan stand on the sidewalk with amber draped against him like some festival banner. He looked exactly like the man in our wedding photos, only sharper and crueler. I wanted confrontation. I wanted to scream. Instead, I left anonymous letters. A single sentence slipped under the door of the house he'd registered as a business address, and another shoved into the mailbox at the bar. "You forged my name. You stole my life." I didn't sign them. I watched from the shadows. They were brushed aside like gossip. Then, 2 nights later, my aunt called me hysterical. She'd seen on the neighborhood app that a man matching Evan's description had been arguing with someone in the alley behind our old neighborhood grocery. Somebody had called the police. I felt my stomach drop, because the man he was arguing with wasn't a stranger. It was a cop I used to know, the kind who knew my name from hospital runs. And somehow he'd said 3 words I never expected. "You're all set." My hands trembled as I listened to my aunt. "He said he took care of it," she whispered. "He said you don't have to worry anymore." A chill went through me. Because those words sounded like the kind of lie that wasn't about paperwork. They sounded like the kind of lie that might involve something far darker than a bad loan. I thought I'd already seen every ugly thing Evan could do. I was wrong. After the county clerk finally pulled the loan file for me, I sat in a fluorescent office that smelled like copier toner and regret, while a bored assistant fed me photocopies. The notary seal was there in the packet, clear as day. Marissa Cole, the rubber stamp circle read, but the typed notary name under the signature said Marissa Cole. Same letters, different order. Sloppy. The clerk shrugged. People spelled names wrong all the time. "Doesn't mean anything," she said. So I kept digging. I called every title company listed on the file. I called the State Notary Commission and asked who issued that seal. That's where the first real tremor hit me. Marissa Cole, the state record showed, hadn't been a random notary at all. She'd been an employee at the very escrow company that handled Evan's loan packet. She'd worked nights doing closings. Her official employer matched the name on the company, letterhead glued to the loan file. That should have been bad enough. But then the clerk hesitated and slid me one more sheet, an internal email chain between the escrow company and the bank. The email thread was a forwarding trail of approvals, and one of the addresses on it was Amber's work email. Amber, the same woman who'd been posting champagne pictures. Amber Collins. Her work address was right there, CC'd on the closing approval with a timestamp the day before the loan was recorded. I remember sitting down hard in the county chair. The room tilted. Amber had access. She wasn't a stranger or an outside flirt. She had keys to the paperwork. I drove to the escrow office because I needed the smell of real people and something to claw at. A receptionist with a perfect bun told me Marissa had been on medical leave for 2 months. "We're short-handed," she said, "but we have cameras in the closing room." She looked at me like I was asking for trouble. "Do you have footage of the closing for the Blue Door loan?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, maybe because I looked like I'd been crying for a week, she told me to wait a minute. She returned with a burned DVD and a notebook with timestamps. I sat in my car in the parking lot and fast-forwarded. There they were, Evan in a cheap gray suit, Amber in a cocktail dress, laughing like they were taking a wedding selfie. The notary, a woman I didn't recognize, sat across the table and stamped papers, sliding a contract toward Evan. The camera caught everything. The seal impression, the click of a pen, Evan signing with the neat, practiced loop he used on every check. Then the camera panned and caught someone out of frame. Amber standing at the doorway, slipping the notary's keys into her coat pocket when the notary stepped out to take a call. The timestamp matched the day my signature supposedly went on the loan. My fingers hovered over the phone. I could call the police. I could fling the DVD at the bank. But then the DVD's last 5 seconds froze on a different shot. Amber at a computer, her face glowing in the monitor light, logging into the escrow system. The username on screen was her work ID. And in the corner of the frame, in a way I only noticed when I paused it and leaned in, was my name on an authorization form, my forged signature visible, next to a transfer that moved our joint savings into Amber Collins' account. This wasn't just a stupid affair, it was a conspiracy. Evan had an inside woman who could touch the seals, edit the records, and move money. She wasn't some casual friend. She sat at the center of the machinery that stole my life. I copied the DVD, labeled it in black marker, and drove straight to a detective I'd once met at the hospital. He'd always been decent to nurses. He took one look at my face, took the DVD, and told me to sit down. "Listen to me," he said, voice low. "You've got evidence here. This is criminal, but you need to be careful who you show it to. Someone already erased a name on the file. Someone was sloppy on purpose." He left the room for a minute and came back with a single printout. I read it and my throat closed. It wasn't a new piece of evidence. It was a bank memo, an internal fraud alert someone had filed 2 weeks before I ever got the foreclosure notice. It listed a transaction flagged for internal suspicion and closed with a note in tiny font. "Pending management review, do not escalate externally." The note was signed by a name I knew too well, Evan's father. My hands went cold. If that little memo was true, this didn't end with Amber and Evan. It spiraled up. And if the man who'd quietly signed, "Do not escalate," wanted this buried, then my DVD in a detective's hand might be exactly the kind of thing that got shoved down a drawer. I left with nothing decided except one raw, dangerous thing: evidence that the theft wasn't sloppy, it was systemized. And someone higher up had already seen a red flag and did nothing. I drove home thinking about the notary's keys in Amber's coat and the signature-stamped paper that had my name on it. The house felt smaller. I sat on my aunt's porch and, with my hands still shaking, clicked open my phone. There was a text waiting from an unknown number. It read, "Stop digging, you don't know what you've poked." That text didn't scare me the way it was supposed to. It lit a fuse. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then typed back one word, "Watch me." No response. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my aunt's guest room, the soft hum of her old box fan filling the silence while I mapped everything out. Every person, every email, every timeline. I pinned printed screenshots on her wall until it looked like a crime board. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore, I was building a trap. If Evan's dad had buried the internal fraud alert, that meant he knew the loan was dirty. He worked as a regional bank manager, the same bank that issued the loan. I realized the truth. The whole thing wasn't just Evan's betrayal. It was a family operation. And that meant I needed to hit where it would actually hurt, the bank's reputation, not just his. I reached out to a journalist I'd met years ago when I was volunteering at a hospital fundraiser. Her name was Leela. She'd moved into investigative reporting for the News and Observer, and I remembered her saying, "Everyone in this town's got dirt. The trick is finding who's willing to get muddy." When I called, her voice went quiet after I explained. "You're telling me your husband, his mistress, and his father forged a mortgage loan and laundered the money through a business they own?" "Yes." "And you have video proof?" "Yes." She whistled softly. "Okay, don't send anything electronically. Bring everything in person." The next day, I printed duplicates of the loan papers, the memo with his dad's signature, the still frames of Amber at the computer, and the copy of the video. I didn't even tell my aunt where I was going. I met Leela at a diner off Capitol Boulevard. She was the kind of woman who looked unshakable, messy bun, leather jacket, eyes that missed nothing. I handed her the folder. She opened it, scanned a few pages, and said, "This isn't a civil mess. This is bank fraud, wire fraud, and probably identity theft. If you're right, this could blow open internal corruption at First Raleigh Bank." Hearing those words made me feel dizzy. Internal corruption. That was bigger than I'd imagined. We made a plan. I'd go quiet for 2 weeks. No more emails, no texts, no calls to Evan or anyone at the bank. She'd verify everything independently, confirm the notary's employment, the timestamp, and whether that memo actually came from the bank's internal fraud system. In those 2 weeks, I pretended to be broken again. I stopped posting, stopped calling mutual friends, stopped reacting. Evan probably thought I'd given up. He even sent one smug email. "Hope you've moved on. We're expanding the bar. Try not to embarrass yourself anymore." That line, "try not to embarrass yourself," stuck to me like tar. What he didn't know was that while he was writing that, the bank's own compliance office was about to receive an anonymous packet with every document I'd collected from a concerned citizen. Leela had contacts there. And just to twist the knife, I filed a report with the state's Financial Regulatory Board, signed, notarized, official, naming every single person involved. Once something is filed with the state, it's public record. That meant Evan's name, Amber's name, and his father's name would be searchable by anyone, employers, investors, even their customers. But I wasn't finished. The Blue Door was having its one-year anniversary gala. The invite was all over social media: black tie event, champagne tower, live jazz band. I printed the invite and pinned it above my desk. That would be the night. I'd been quiet long enough. Leela said, "If you're going to confront them, do it where the story ends, not where it started." I knew exactly what she meant. So I started writing my speech. The one I'd deliver right before everything came crashing down. What I didn't know then, what blindsided me only days later, was that one person inside my own circle had already betrayed me again. And that betrayal would turn my plan into something far more dangerous than I ever intended. I thought the detective would be my secret weapon. Instead, he became the blade. The plan was simple. Leela would publish the exposé the week after the gala, after I made my scene, and handed over the DVD to her on camera. We'd force the bank into a corner: public outrage, regulators, lawsuits. Evan and his father would be exposed, the bar would collapse, and maybe I'd get my house back. I trusted the detective because I'd seen him on hospital runs, polite, the kind of man who remembered a nurse's name. He'd taken the DVD without a flinch and promised to keep it secure until I needed it in court. He said he'd anonymize my report to the compliance office if things got messy. I left the DVD with him in a manila envelope like it was the last honest thing I owned. 3 days before the gala, my aunt called me crying. "Someone put a notice on the door at the house," she said. "You should see this." I braced myself for another threat. Instead, she read the headline to me like a knife twisting: "Local woman accused of forgery, restraining order filed after threats." The article was small, anonymous, but poisonous. It claimed I'd been aggressive to bank employees, that I'd threatened staff at the escrow company, and that a temporary restraining order had been granted to protect Evan and Amber. There was a quote from a concerned neighbor, vague and clean. There was also a photo, a grainy still of me at the bar's entrance, taken from a distance, captioned "Alleged harasser." I didn't call Evan. I called the detective. He answered on the third ring, voice clipped. "You saw it," he said. "I'm sorry." He sounded small in a way that should have made me feel vindicated, like finally the truth was out. I asked him who had shown the footage to the press. He paused too long. "Someone from the bank came asking questions," he said finally. "They frightened the clerk. They said they had proof you'd been threatening people." Proof. The word landed like a weight. "What proof?" I demanded. There was silence then. "They said they had camera footage of you outside the escrow office. They served the papers. I tried to push back, but my supervisor warned me off. They said this would get ugly." "No," I said, the way you tell a child no. "You gave them the DVD." He made a noise, a half laugh, half sob. "They asked for it. They promised to protect you if we handed it over. They promised an investigation. I thought they'd open it, find the tampering, and it would all be over. I didn't know they'd use it too." His voice died. My hands went numb. I thought of the detective's face when he took the envelope. Solemn, the look of a man doing the right thing. I thought of the DVD burning a hole in his desk, of someone in a suit, with a silver watch and a calm voice, saying, "Hand it over." I thought of Evan's father, the bank manager, cozy and patient, telling men like that what to do. When I got to the gala, I wasn't prepared for how cinematic his betrayal would look. The valet refused to take my keys. A security guard, hired by the bank's PR firm, apparently, politely asked me to step aside. Cameras clustered at the door like a flock of birds. Someone had already leaked the restraining order. Photographers were waiting for me to make a scene. Amber floated through the crowd in a black dress, laughing, the same smile I'd seen in the video. Evan watched from the bar, arms folded, the picture of calm. I held the envelope, my backup copy, pressed to my chest. I'd thought the detective would keep it safe. Instead, I had nothing but a paper that said a court had told me to stay away. A woman in a blazer with a press badge blocked my path and leaned in close enough for me to smell her perfume. "Ma'am, you can't go in," she said, voice syrupy. "The owners have a right to security." I tried to explain, to tell anyone who would listen that the restraining order was a lie, that the DVD proved it. The cameras loved the drama. A broken woman at the door of a bar, crying and ranting. Amber's friend snapped a photo that would make the rounds in an hour. Evan's father watched from across the room with a faint smile and a glass in his hand. As I stood there, humiliated and shaking, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. We took care of the detective.